we welcome you to the historic Fatzinger Hall and the Waterloo Library. We give a special welcome to Thomas James Lewis Jr. and his family. At this point, I'm going to introduce my fellow board member, Peter Houghton.
Thanks, Josh. 5 years ago, the Society created the Henry C. Wells Award. This award is named after Waterloo druggist Henry Wells, who in 1866, in the spirit of dedication and community pride, played a major role to initiate and organize the first community-wide Memorial Day observance in the country, right here in the village of Waterloo, New York. The award recognizes a resident of Waterloo who, through their efforts and time, has made Waterloo a better place to live, work, worship, and enjoy. It is my privilege tonight, on behalf of the Society, to present this year's Henry C. Wells Award to Thomas James Jim Lewis Jr. Jim was born in Jim was born in 1927 in Clifton Springs, New York. Attended Clifton Springs school system. He left high school and enlisted in the U.S. Army at the end of World War II. He was placed in the 12th Cavalry Regiment of the 1st Cavalry Division and assigned to occupation duty in Japan. He was a T5 truck driver during this duty. He was discharged from the Army on February 15, 1948, and he returned to Central New York. During Jim's overseas duty, his parents and sister Marion had moved from Clifton Springs to Ovid, New York, and Jim joined them there in 1948. Permanent employment in the Finger Lakes region was difficult to find because of thousands of veterans returning home after the war. Jim did find employment as a ward attendant at Willard State Hospital. Although Jim was only there for 6 months, 2 events took place during that short time period that affected his life. First, he met Betty Lohr, who was also working at Willard, and he and Betty were married at Christ Church in Willard in August 1949. Secondly, even though he knew very little about U.S. Army hospital units, remember he was with the Cavalry Division, he joined the 343rd General Hospital Reserve Unit attached to the Willard State Hospital. Jim left his Willard employment for a position with New York Telephone at the Geneva office. He worked on a line gang and then became an installation technician. However, that work was soon interrupted because on September 3rd, 1950, the Willard Hospital Reserve Unit was recalled to active duty with the outbreak of the Korean War. Jim found himself being sent back to Japan, and he worked as a medical technician in several base hospitals, treating wounded servicemen that were flown into Japan from Korea. He was discharged from the second tour of duty in February 1952 and returned home to his job with New York Telephone. He and Betty then moved from Ovid to Waterloo in 1952 to shorten his drive to work in Geneva. As you will see from this presentation, this move resulted in a significant gain for our Waterloo community. Jim and Betty bought a house at 15 Reed Street on the west end of the village, and Jim still lives there today. Jim remained with New York Telephone for 30 years, did installation work throughout much of New York State and into New England. In 1981, he chose to go with the AT&T telephone system and worked another 5 years for that corporation. He retired from his telephone career in 1986. Jim and Betty had one son, Thomas James III, who lives in Newark. Jim's wife, Betty, died in 2008. Within the Waterloo and Finger Lakes area, Jim is probably best known for his volunteer work and activities with area veterans organizations. Jim is the director of the Seneca County Veterans Office. He is a member and past commander of the Waterloo Veterans of Foreign Wars Memorial Post 6433. He has served a term as president of the New York State Korean War Veterans. He currently serves on the Finger Lakes Veterans Advisory Board for the Canandaigua VA Hospital. and is also on the advisory board for the Sampson's Veterans Cemetery. Over the past 3 years, in addition to his several board activities, Jim has personally been sending care packages to our nation's soldiers in Iraq and Afghanistan. He collects and spends his own funds and packages food and magazines and toiletries and snacks for the troops. He sends about 10 packages a month to individual soldiers to help brighten their days. Starting in 1966, when the village of Waterloo was officially recognized as the birthplace of Memorial Day, Jim began serving as the Memorial Day Parade Chairman and did it continuously for 40 years. He is still involved every Memorial Day with the military observances at the local cemeteries. At this time, I'm going to pause in my presentation remarks and introduce someone who has worked closely with Jim over many years on issues and projects on behalf of area veterans. It is my pleasure to introduce our New York State Senator from the 54th District, Seneca County's own, Senator Michael Mazzoli.
Thank you, Peter. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's very nice that you would take time out of your schedule to be a part of these proceedings today. I have special thanks to the members of the Waterloo Library and Historical Society, and the officers, Corinne, Tim, Lynn, and Mike. Thank you for your efforts in recognizing and being part of this wonderful Memorial Day weekend and ceremony. Waterloo is the custodian of Memorial Day, and with that responsibility, Waterloo has taken it upon themselves to ensure that the true spirit and the true meaning of Memorial Day is kept alive and well. And congratulations for that effort. I'm honored to represent this wonderful community. And let's give the board and all those members, Josh and Peter, a round of applause for keeping the true spirit of Memorial Day alive. And in so doing, by recognizing those who are from the community in the presentation of the Wells Award, who do so much in that very vein, in keeping the spirit present, keeping it before the current generation, and imparting it into future generations of leadership, and making sure they understand what the essence of Memorial Day is all about. I am honored to be on this stage, and I found out parenthetically, did not know it before this afternoon, that I'm on the stage with 100% Republican participation. Of course, you knew President Lincoln was a Republican. Certainly, President Roosevelt at many times acted like a Republican. I never asked Peter what his political persuasions were until today, and it doesn't surprise me that he would be one that cared about the rights of individuals and the tenets of the Republican Party. I knew Jim, our honoree, as first and foremost an American. And regardless of whatever political party he was, I admired him a great deal. He is a Republican, but he's much, much more than that. I'm here to present a resolution that was enacted by both the New York State Assembly and Senate. Assemblyman Kolb wishes he could be here with us today, but his schedule did not permit him. But this bipartisan resolution in both houses of the state legislature chronicles the wonderful record of Jim Lewis, discusses how he was in fact part of the greatest generation of Americans, those who gave themselves freely, those who committed to end the intolerance and the enslavement of the world during World War II. That could have happened if it weren't for heroes like Jim Lewis, who answered the call. Jim himself at a very young age for that war. and Jim found himself, after being a veteran of World War II, commissioned again to answer the call and defend his nation's interests during the Korean War. I first met Jim when he was extremely active and continues to be extremely active in veterans issues and veterans organizations here in Waterloo and the Central Finger Lakes. Jim, as Peter mentioned, is a member, among his many responsibilities, is a member of the advisory board of the Sampson Veterans Memorial Cemetery. I asked Jim to take on that responsibility a number of years ago. And we had a lot of ups and downs in terms of the acceptance and the establishment of the cemetery. It took us well over a decade to establish, a very hard work. But throughout that hard work, Jim was always there. And I could not ever look Jim Lewis in the eye again unless we established that Veterans Memorial Cemetery, because Jim was dedicated to its establishment. He was focused on honoring our veterans in this appropriate way. And Jim, your steadfast support of those who you served with and those who were to come after will forever be remembered and appreciated. This resolution is a small thank you note by the New York State Legislature for Jim Lewis's heroic activities and his commitment to his community. With this, I present it to him with great personal thanks for his efforts on behalf of all our local veterans. And if any one of you wonder where heroes are today, look at people like Jim Lewis. Look at people who have focused on what's real and honorable about this nation. And I certainly am grateful to know him, to work with him, and to call him a friend. Ladies and gentlemen, let me present this formal resolution to the honoree today, Jim Lewis.
In addition to his strong involvement with area veterans groups, Jim was also involved with several other Waterloo community activities. He served on the Waterloo School District Board of Education. He's a 61-year member of St. Paul's Episcopal Church and has served on their vestry 4 times. He was very active with Waterloo Little League Baseball, having served not only as a manager and a player agent, but he also served on the board of directors and is a past president of that board. He was involved in 2 other local sports activities as a meet referee for the Wayne Finger Lakes Track and Field Officials Association, and was also a basketball referee at the public school and community college level. One activity that Jim is quietly proud of is his long association with the Boy Scout program. Jim became a member of the Clifton Springs Scout Troop 59 in 1939. Upon coming to Waterloo, he was Scoutmaster of the Waterloo Troop 74, sponsored by St. Paul's Episcopal Church. He served on the executive board of the 5-County Finger Lakes Scout Council, and he has been awarded the Boy Scout Silver Beaver Award, which is the highest volunteer award for scouting activities. The award is presented to those who implement the scouting program and perform community service through hard work, self-sacrifice, dedication, and many years of service. This award is given to those who really do not go out and seek it. That last phrase aptly describes this year's recipient of the Wells Award. In all his years in Waterloo, Jim never sought the limelight. He is a longtime member of the community who has worked behind the scenes with many organizations and had the commitment, dedication, and desire to give of himself for the betterment of the Waterloo area. It is with great pleasure that the Waterloo Library and Historical Society bestows its 5th annual Henry C. Wells Award to former U.S. Army Staff Sergeant Thomas James Lewis, Jr. The flag for Jim, Henry C. Wells Award, presented to Thomas James Lewis, Jr. This award is bestowed upon the citizen of Waterloo, New York, who embodies the character and commitment of the founder of Memorial Day, Henry C. Wells, toward the betterment of our community. From the Waterloo Library and Historical Society, 2013.
Thank you very much. I really don't know what to say. This is up beyond the call of duty. I'm going to take this home. This is for the past, and I hope somebody else will come along in the years to come. But this really belongs to the people that have gone beyond my family, all the guys I know. I think I better leave it right there. Thank you again, but I have something for the museum on Main Street. There's a story that goes with this. There's two other places in the village that have them. They're both public. One is in St. Paul's Episcopal Church, on the right-hand side of the church, 3/4 of the way down with a light on it. The other one hangs down in the county courthouse on Thurber Drive where the supervisors meet. I have one here I would like to give to Peter. Maybe we can put it down on Main Street at the museum, along with the American flag. I may. Let's not forget our people.
At this time, President Lincoln.
Well, I'm delighted to have the opportunity to be here on this auspicious occasion. Congratulations,
Thank you.
Louis.
President.
Apparently, all creation is rejoicing, at least the Canada geese are all here. I remember when I was just a boy getting hold of a little book, probably such a one as none of you have ever seen. It was entitled Parson Weems' Life of General George Washington. And I remember reading therein, and I was just a boy, probably around my earliest time of being able to read of the struggles that those who had gone before had endured. The danger that they incurred when they first assembled to frame the declarations of independence, and then the hardship endured by the officers and soldiers of the army who finally achieved that independence. And I remember, mere boy that I was, thinking, not only on that particular occasion and nearly every occasion in which I indulged in perusing that little book, but for years afterwards, thinking, what was it that inspired those men, those soldiers of old? Now, funny how that happens. But the remembrance, the occasion which is being celebrated this weekend for a memorial, whether it be a book or a dedication or a celebration, is of vital importance. All my life long, that those early years and the inspiration, what I finally discovered was it was that sentiment in the Declaration of Independence that gave liberty and gave hope, not just to the people of my grandfather's age, but hope for all the world. Perhaps at some future time the weights could be lifted from the shoulders of all men everywhere, and all could be afforded a fair chance and an equal start in the race of life. So these occasions of commemoration and celebration and dedication, to remember the world has never had a good definition of liberty. And we, as Americans, often need to be reminded of what it means. So I'm pleased to be a part of this, to once again recall the struggles that must and shall forever continue wherever men believe that liberty is the heritage of all men everywhere. Thank you.
We now have, from the left, actually a progressive president, President Roosevelt.
Thank you. I want to assure the senator here that I have always been and will always be a Republican. I cannot say as much for my cousin Franklin. I tried to get Franklin to join the Republican Party early on in his career, but as you know, his district is heavily Democrat. Franklin, being the political animal that he was, saw the writing on the wall. Of course, if his district had been old cigar-smoking mule skinners, so would Franklin. I am honored to be on the stage here with Abraham Lincoln. He's my hero, as he is the hero of Americans of my generation and of generations to follow. It may be of some comfort to you, Mr. Lincoln, to realize finally that to the American people, you stand on the first rank of American presidents. Only George Washington stands equal to you before the eyes of your countrymen and the world. I'm also honored to be on the stage tonight with Mr. James Lewis, who, while he may not have the national reputation of Mr. Lincoln, he shares one of the vital qualities, not only of Mr. Lincoln, but of all great Americans, that of leadership. I have never felt that I had any special talent of any sort, except I seem to be able to lead at times. So if you will indulge me, I should like to say a few words on that topic, leadership. By the honor that has been bestowed upon Mr. Lewis tonight, you have validated as a community his value. You have validated that a man like him is vital to the life, the everyday life of a community. You have shown that he is one of those who's willing to step forward, take the reins, get something done. And because of him, Waterloo and the Finger Lakes area is better for it. How do you recognize if someone is a leader? It's not that difficult. A leader is generally the person who's willing to step forward in any difficult situation and do something. They do not wait. They do not put it in the background look for somebody else to get something done. A leader hates indecision. He hates inaction. So a leader's normally that person which will come forward, maybe hesitantly, but they come forward to take the reins and get something done. Some folks, well, they say, oh, I can't be a leader. I don't know how to do it. Look for somebody else. I'll help in the background. And if they help, that's fine. But I think Mr. Lewis would be the first to tell you that any of you can do the things that he's done. Any of you can be effective and a benefit for your community. What do you look for? What traits are we looking for in a leader? Well, a leader normally has a vision. They know where they want to go. They know what lies ahead. What are they trying to accomplish? They might not know exactly how to do it, but they know that down that road is where I need to go. And then they'll share that vision with others. Say, this is what we need to do, or this is how we need to do it. Or, let's just get going and see what happens. Being an effective leader generally means getting folks to go where you want to go. There's more to it than just that. That's a start. That's a first step. If you're looking for a leader, here's what a leader must have within them that I think is shown in Mr. Lincoln's administration and hopefully my administration and all administrations that do something of benefit and goodwill for the United States of America. A leader has to recognize the talent and individual skills in others. He Can't be afraid to delegate authority. You can't do everything. You can't, the modern word, micromanage. You can't micromanage. You have to be willing to trust that those who are working with you can get the job done too. You must be decisive in your actions. Don't be wishy-washy or willy-nilly. You do that, you'll start looking like the Congress of the United States. Expect errors. And when they come, don't correct them and go on. Don't worry about criticism, because there'll be plenty of it. Doesn't matter what you decide to do, there's going to be somebody who's going to criticize you for it. More than just one person. It's not the critic who counts. Oops, I'm getting excited about it. It's not the critic who counts, not the man who points out where the strong man stumbled or where the doer of deeds could have done better. The credit belongs to the man who's actually in the arena, whose face is marred by the dirt and the sweat and the blood, who strives valiantly and errs again and again, for there is no effort without failure. But he knows the great enthusiasms, the great devotions, and he spends himself in a worthy cause, and who, in the end, knows the triumph of high achievement, and at the worst, if he fails while daring greatly, so that his place shall never be with those cold and timid souls who know neither victory nor defeat. That's a leader. A leader must concentrate on the task at hand, not the one down the road or next year or the year after, but what are we doing right now? And a leader should not seek success, but seek to deserve success. And finally, a leader should do what is right. And it is not difficult. It's not a mind-provoking thing. We know what's right and what's wrong. And so we must do what is right. I think that if you examine all the accomplishments of Mr. Lewis on this stage tonight, that you will find that he, through his life, has filled all those tenets, those traits of leadership. And for that, I am grateful that he is not only here tonight with us, but he'll be in the future to show efforts of leadership to Waterloo and the community of the Finger Lakes. Thank you very much.